You're going to want to stay with us tonight because we have unbelievable news. It's groundbreaking information. You're not going to want to miss it. In moments, we'll talk to two House members who have actually seen that document from the House Intel Committee on the Russia investigation that could potentially sink the Mueller probe. Yes, you got it. Plus, California officials are telling local authorities and employers that they should not comply with federal immigration officers. Isn't that lovely? We have the head of ICE here with his response. And are you being lied to about the number of dreamers who would get amnesty? We have some mind-blowing numbers to share with you ahead. Plus, Anthony Scaramucci is here on Trump's economic revival and a speech that even some liberals are calling the best of his presidency. But first, liberals exposed for putting DACA ahead of American citizens and exposing the truth about corruption inside the Obama FBI and the birth of the Mueller investigation. That's the focus of tonight's angle. I mean, this is unbelievable. The government, again, runs out of cash tomorrow, which means that unless the Senate votes for a temporary spending bill, 5 days, 6 days, 6 months, to keep the government open, all but essential government services will be shut down midnight Friday. Democrats and a few goofball Republicans have decided to hold the entire funding of the U.S. government hostage for a deal to give legal status to 800,000 illegal aliens brought here as minors. Yes, you heard that right. Members of Congress elected to represent the interests of Americans and uphold the Constitution of the United States have now fully exposed themselves as nothing more than a permanent lobby for open borders and unending cheap labor. It is a total travesty. Now, the president, despite not having campaigned on giving amnesty to anyone, was willing and is willing to do a deal to help the DACA people. But he required a few basic concessions from the party out of power, the Democrats, like ending chain migration and the visa lottery and funding the wall that he promised to build. Democrats, not the president, walked away from the bargaining table in an attempt to force his hand. Now, I was thinking about this today. Do you remember who was blamed by the media back in 2013 when a few conservative Republicans, was Ted Cruz and Mike Lee, they were the party out of power then, forced a government shutdown? Remember, it was about Obamacare. Well, the media and the party in power then unanimously blamed Republicans.
The president drew a firm line that he's not going to that he will negotiate, right, but he's not going to do it until after he gets both a clean CR that extends the government funding, reopens the government, and raise the debt limit.
I'm really afraid that these yahoos are going to send us right over the cliff.
What we're not for is negotiating with people who have a bomb strapped to their chest. We're not going to do that.
Well, they were following the narrative set by the head of the party in power back then, President Barack Obama.
When you have a situation in which a faction is willing potentially to default on U.S. government obligations, then we are in trouble. And if they're willing to do it now, they'll be willing to do it later.
Oh, a faction. It was a faction. Well, we have a faction now. Chuck Schumer, Dick Durbin, Lindsey Graham. Well, it turns out that Republicans weren't really hurt all that much in the 2014 midterms by that shutdown, as many predicted. And the only thing most people remembered about the Ted Cruz filibuster was this.
Say, I like green eggs and ham. I do. I like them, Sam, I am.
I sometimes play that to my kids at night, puts them right to sleep. I mean, Democrats here, though, in this certain case, I'm telling you, they are playing with fire. And we're seeing a little movement tonight by Chuck Schumer. We'll get to that in just a moment. A new CBS poll that was just released shows that even among those who support helping the DACA folks, Americans do not want to shut the government down to do so. And by the way, even with all the media disinformation out there about what chain migration is, more Americans think immigration should be based on merit more than family ties. second cousin twice removed, aunt, uncle, you know the drill. Well, all of that is good news for Trump. So you know what I say? I say it's time to call their bluff on this. Republicans shouldn't be cowed at all. They shouldn't be worried about a government shutdown. I say let the Democrats take their stand and force a shutdown of the government for illegal immigrants. Then the American voters will finally see once and for all what the Democrats and amnesty fanatics really think. That the hopes and well-being and dreams of American citizens just aren't as important as the potential votes that they're going to get by an influx of illegal immigrants. And speaking of exposing the truth, Republicans in the House have finally seen the contents of that House intel report on the Fusion GPS dossier and the Mueller special counsel investigation. And apparently, it is a blockbuster. Sources are telling the Ingraham angle that the contents paint a disturbing picture of misdeeds and corruption inside the Obama FBI, which runs straight into the heart of the special counsel's office. And as of now, the report is secret, but many members of Congress are asking the Speaker, Speaker Ryan, to move to declassify the document and release its contents.
The intelligence memo that we have just read is so alarming that it must be immediately disclosed to the American people.
I couldn't agree more with that point. Speaker Ryan should cut through whatever bureaucratic protocol is necessary to see that the contents of this report are made public. Let's remove all doubt about what's in that report. And I'll tell you this, if it turns out that our FBI has been compromised and that American citizens have been targeted for surveillance for purely political reasons, or that the Obama Justice Department and maybe even some in the White House were in on it, boy, do the people have a right to know. And they have a right to know now, not 6 weeks from now and not 6 months from now. Remember, this dossier, this Fusion GPS dossier, was a campaign-generated document paid for by the Democrats. And if it was used to justify spying on anyone associated with Donald Trump, heads should roll. It's time to expose this entire circus to the sunlight. All of us should be able to trust federal law enforcement to be objective and certainly not filled with some vengeful political hackdom. We all deserve that. And in this case, of course, the president and anyone else in Robert Mueller's sights, they deserve it too. And that's the angle. Joining us now from Washington are two House members who have seen these classified documents, Raul Labrador of Idaho and Andy Biggs of Arizona. We're also joined by Fox News contributor Byron York, who has been extensively covering the Russia probe and this dossier issue. Gentlemen, it's great to see you tonight. Congressman Labrador, I want to start with you. I started getting calls. I'm here on the West Coast, but I started getting calls about this at about, 6:30 in the morning Pacific time by congressmen who started to read this report. And they didn't reveal anything they weren't supposed to, but they said, Laura, whatever you do, the people have to know what is in this. This has to get declassified. Tell us how we can declassify it and whatever you can tell us about what's inside.
Great, Laura. Thanks for having me on your show. This is so important. And it's important for your viewers to know that the House has the authority to release this information. We don't have to declassify it. House Rule 10, and this is something that I think we're going to talk about a lot over the next few weeks. House Rule 10 allows the Select Committee to release the information based on the public interest. If they believe that the information is important enough to the public, that is of vital importance to the public, they can release it. So all we need to do is have a vote from the House, and the House Select Committee can do that. And I think we need to do that immediately. In the next week or so, I believe that the American people need to see everything that is in this document. I cannot tell you, Congressman Biggs can't tell you either about what we read today, but people will be shocked when they see this information.
Congressman Biggs, before we get to Byron, and we are going to hit on this immigration debate and the government shutdown and the Labrador's legislation, all that with Byron and you guys. But on this issue of the release of this report, Is there any national security concern about releasing this document that you can see? Now, you've read it. Anything
Laura,
that Paul Ryan could point to avoid a move to declassify or a bureaucratic administrative move to release its contents?
I don't think so. I saw nothing in there that releasing it to the public would have any negative effect on our national interest. In fact, I think it's just the opposite. I think the national interest is harmed by keeping it a secret from the public. I think we have to be transparent. We have to get this out there. It is so vital, so important. And I think Americans are going to be as outraged as I know Raul and I are, and many of my colleagues who've read this. It has to get out. And I don't believe you can hide behind the shield of national security interest because the problem is just flipped on its head. And you'll notice it was Democrats in that committee that don't want it released. Not one voted to release it. Yeah.
All right, Byron, I want to go to you on this. I heard, again, 4 people, congressmen, this morning. And people very high up in the Justice Department and the FBI could very well lose their jobs if this report goes public. Do you believe that, given what we've heard from Glenn Simpson, who's the head of Fusion GPS, he said he's trying to like poo-poo the idea that, they really moved on the dossier with the old administration. How explosive could this be?
Well, it could be pretty darned explosive. You and I are the 2 people here who haven't actually seen the document. This for quite a long while. What's been interesting is the investigators in the House have been kind of in a box for months. They were learning things of great public interest, but it was classified and they couldn't tell the public. And the institution that had the authority to declassify it, the Justice Department, was the institution they were investigating. I mean, it was just kind of a trap. And I think what we saw today was a kind of a brilliant effort to bust out of that, which was to use a maneuver to create a summary of their work and allow all members of the House to see it. So it wasn't just a small group of 13 people on the Republicans on the House Intelligence Committee. All of a sudden it was anybody in the House could go down and take a look at this, and we've been hearing them coming out and saying, wow, this is really, really big. And that is increasing the momentum to try this parliamentary maneuver that Representative Labrador and others have been talking about.
And they also, at the same time, I guess, Congressman Labrador, the Democrats were okay with releasing the Glenn Simpson testimony, yes. Correct? They were okay with that. We're going to play a snippet of that for our viewers. It's important for them to see what the founder of that Fusion GPS said. Let's watch. Oh, we don't. Oh, sorry, it's a full screen. Sorry about that, guys. He was asked, did the FBI ever reach out to you or Fusion GPS in relation to the matters that Mr. Steele informed them upon? He said no. You've never heard from anyone inside the U.S. government in relation to those matters, either the FBI or the Department of Justice? Answer, well, after the election, during the election, no. Well, what did you hear after, and from whom and when? I was asked to provide some information to the Justice Department. Question, by whom and when? It was by a prosecutor named Bruce Orr who was following up. Did Mr. Orr reach out to you? Or how did that shake out? Yeah, so in other words, Nellie Orr, who works for Fusion GPS, Bruce Orr ended up being the source of the questions about that dossier. Congressman Labrador, your reaction to that?
Well, I can't speak about the specific facts because I saw this memo today. I have to be very careful of what I say about the facts that happen here. But what's interesting is that this morning, the Democrats decided to vote against releasing this memo. That's number one. Number two, when I was in the room, and I've heard from other members of Congress, when they were in the room, there were no Democrats who actually came down to look at this memo. So they were so interested in the Russia collusion story until their Russia collusion story actually started unraveling. So now that we have some information that is being provided to every member of the House, they are unwilling to release it or to even look at it. I think what the American people will find is that they're going to be shocked by this memo. I invite everybody to use the hashtag release the memo. I hope all of your viewers start with the release the memo, because we need to push our House leadership to do this. And I believe that they want to do this. I hope that they do, and that they stand with the American people and the
Congressman
public
Biggs, we're way out of time. We could do an hour on this. Are people going to lose their jobs when this is going to get released? Are people going to lose their jobs?
It probably ought to. Probably ought to. Let's just say I'm shocked that some have it already.
All right, gentlemen, fascinating. We didn't even have time to get into the immigration bill of Labrador that the president supports and the White House supports, but we really appreciate the analysis. And guys, get this. Right here in California, local officials are telling their police officers not to cooperate with federal immigration officials. You cannot make this stuff up. The head of ICE is here exclusively with his response.
The federal government has decided to appeal the district court's granting of the preliminary injunction, but we're ready, as we were before. We will fight side by side.
We're coming to you tonight from Los Angeles, in the sanctuary state of beautiful California. It's ground zero in the showdown over illegal immigration. The San Francisco Chronicle reporting that Immigration and Customs Enforcement is about to launch massive immigration raids across Northern California. The raids would target criminals and those already slated for deportation, but local police departments are reportedly not planning to cooperate with the feds. So let's go straight to the source, or maybe the target. Immigration and Customs Enforcement Director Tom Homan joins us from Fredericksburg, Virginia. Director Homan, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Here in California, we are at ground zero for the illegal immigration battles. And your agency, the Immigration Customs Enforcement, has said that you're going to be carrying out immigration raids in Northern California soon. And no big surprise, some of the Democrats are not happy about that. Dianne Feinstein and Kamala Harris, the two senators from California, just wrote you a letter, and they said diverting resources in an effort to punish California and score political points is an abhorrent abuse of power, not to mention a terrible misuse of scarce resources, sir. How do you respond?
Well, first of all, ICE didn't announce any operation. We certainly don't announce operations in advance of that. It'd be an officer safety issue. What I did say is we're going to increase resources in the state of California in response to the sanctuary city policies they passed. And let me explain this. This isn't a threat to California. This isn't a retaliation for sanctuary city laws. We used to have access to the jail, so one officer can sit in a jail and process 10 illegal criminal aliens in a shift. Since they're releasing them to the street, that requires me to have more resources to locate these people out in the community, and also for officer safety reasons. In a county jail, they don't have access to weapons. We have to locate these people out in the streets, in their homes, in their place of business, where they have access to what weapons. We need more officers out there to do that job safely. So adding resources, which I said I'm going to do, is add resources to law enforcement officers of the state of California, is in direct response to the sanctuary laws that forced me in that position. As far as the congressman that wrote the letter, let me say this about the congressman who wrote the letter. I didn't think Congress is in the business of enacting laws they didn't want law enforcement to enforce. I'm enforcing the laws that Congress enacted. And for them to say that I shouldn't be enforcing the laws, there would be no integrity in the entire system. We're simply a law enforcement agency that's taking a sworn duty to enforce the laws of this country. We enforce the laws that Congress enacted. Both those congressmen sit on the legislative panel. I'm doing what they tell me to do. I'm enforcing laws that they've enacted. I'm enforcing laws that the president signed.
Now the Attorney General, Javier Becerra, has said that they may take enforcement action, guess what, against employers who assist ICE in finding these individuals or giving information to ICE about known illegal immigrants. So the state might actually go after employers for working with the federal government, and they cite their Protection of Immigrant Act, which passed and was signed into law, went into effect January 1st of this year, because they will be then, I guess, intruding on the privacy of the illegal immigrants. So this is what you're up against. You're up against these state officials who are threatening essentially local law enforcement or employers. Director Homan.
Look, If he's the Attorney General, he certainly knows what the law says. We are enforcing the laws enacted by Congress. And you know, is there any other federal law enforcement agency, state and local agency, where congressmen or elected officials or Attorney Generals say do not enforce the law? No one asks FBI not to enforce law, or DEA or ATF or the local police departments. We're clearly enforcing the laws enacted by Congress. And let me say this, for those that say they don't give us access to these low-level criminals in county jails, the local police department arrested these people. They locked them up in their facilities. These aren't choir boys. These are people that have been arrested for crimes and sitting in a county jail.
Yeah.
So
Speaking of,
so if they're not serious crimes, why have they been arrested?
From a few years ago, we had 2 police officers brutally murdered by an illegal immigrant, Luis Bracamontes, who killed these police officers. And he had been deported several times. We have a soundbite, we're going to play it, of what he said recently when he appeared in court. Let's watch.
Gentlemen, jury, please step out of the hallway. They're dead. I don't you regret that. The only thing that regret is the skill too. I wish I killed more of them. I will break up soon and I will kill more.
So you see what he says. He said, basically, I killed them, they're dead, and if I could, I'd kill more. This is what the fallout is of this sanctuary state-wide policy that's in effect. And then we have other examples, individuals who stabbed 61-year-olds who's also been deported. And you never hear about these people from the Attorney General or these other officials like Jerry Brown, who are always lobbying for more, frankly, open borders policies.
Well, look, again, you know, these sanctuary city policies, it's a clear public safety threat. Releasing a public safety threat back into the public is just bad policy. And I say it again, they're in a county jail. They've been arrested by the local officials. They're sitting in a cell. So apparently they thought they're a danger to the community. When they're done with them, why not let the federal law enforcement agency in charge of enforcing law take custody of these people, not only remove them from the community, remove them from the country. So let's remember, when you enter this country illegally, you commit a crime by entering this country illegally.
No. Right now, it's a universal right. Very quickly, the local mayor of Oakland, Libby Schaaf, has told reporters that her police and her city are not going to assist you in any upcoming enforcement actions. A quick message to her.
So let me speak not to her, because I certainly don't respect her opinion. I don't respect what they did. Let me say this to the men and women of the Oakland Police Department. First of all, I'm sad you're put in the position that a politician who's never carried a gun and badge and never put their life on the line every day like you did makes these type of decisions that affect public safety and officer safety. But I'll give you this commitment from ICE. If you're out there doing a lawful operation and you are in need of assistance, if you find yourself in trouble and there's an ICE agent within earshot or in the area, we will do everything we can within our legal authority to assist you. We'll do everything we can to make sure you go home safe that night to your families. We will never turn our back on law enforcement. ICE has your 6.
All right. Well, we appreciate it, Director Holman. There's going to be an upcoming legal clash, no doubt about it, here in the state of California on this immigration issue. We'll be watching it every step of the way. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much.
All right, that was fascinating. In America, to put it simply, you've been lied to. In just a minute, we'll tell you why politicians are not being honest with you about the actual numbers of so-called dreamers who... Now, we've been led to believe that an amnesty deal for dreamers would cover 800,000 or so illegal immigrants who've received protection from that deportation under that Obama-era DACA program. But, there's a big but, that's only those, of course, who registered for the program. There are actually a staggering 3.6 million illegals brought into the United States before their 18th birthday who could ultimately be eligible for amnesty under the DACA deal that the Democrats are pushing. That's a little bit of a differential, don't you think? Well, that bombshell was dropped in a report from USA Today just a few hours ago, and they cited a study in October by the Migration Policy Institute. We got to go to the Policy Institute to get the numbers. Here with reaction is Fox News contributor and senior editor at The Federalist, Molly Hemingway in Washington, along with Mega TV news anchor Elvira Salazar in Miami. It's great to see both of you. Molly, I want to start with you on this because I think people get confused between the DACA and the Dreamers. And the DACA is only the 800,000, correct? That they happen to register and sign up and they fit in that timeline. But there is a much larger pool of people who, if they had their druthers, the Democrats would extend amnesty to.
Right, and the DACA are the sort of most photogenic, most sympathetic group of not just illegal residents of the country, but people who are brought here as children. The media presentation of this group is not entirely accurate. You know, they refer to them as children. In fact, the average age of a DACA recipient is 24. You know, they say they're in college. I think it's something like 5% of them are. You know, they portray them as people who are dreamers, dreaming of a college education. I think fewer than 900 are in the military. The media presentation has not been entirely accurate. But even then, we're just talking about the DACA recipients. The larger population, which is what a lot of people want to provide amnesty for, is much, much more significant, to the tune of millions.
And Molly, before we go to Elvira here, you actually wrote a piece saying the Democrats do not want, in reality, a DACA deal. Now, why would you say that?
Well, I think there's at least a case to be made that they don't actually demonstrate that they would like a deal, in part because it's not great electoral politics. You know, both Republicans and Democrats do this, where they use an issue that whips up their base to make sure that they turn out and vote. And when people aren't willing to make any concessions on a border wall, on an end to chain migration, on an end to visa lotteries, or, you know, restrictions on any of these things, one wonders if they're really serious about a DACA fix as they claim they are.
Now, Elvira, I want to go to you. When I host my radio show, I hear from a lot of Americans, and a lot of them are immigrants to the United States. And what I hear often is, I had to wait 8 years and spend all this money and fill out all the paperwork, and I did it because I believed in the rule of law and the system of laws in this country. And they are really annoyed that people come into the country, whether from their parents or not, and then they start making demands of the government. That irks a lot of people, and like, I'm not an immigrant, but I can understand why that irks legal immigrants.
I understand, and that's true. But, you know, the problem here is that it doesn't matter whether it's DACA or the Dreamers. The system has failed everybody. Has failed the fellow Americans, the people that are online, and the illegals. And why do I say that? Because right now the illegals are the ones bearing the brunt of the responsibility. And those kids that came into the country before they were 18 years old, what are we going to do with them? Just like the 800,000 that Congress is fighting for. What are we going to do? We can't deport them because they're kids. I know that some fellow Americans would like for them to be deported, but you know, Laura, that is political suicide. That is not going to happen. So then what I think we should do is just sit at the table and create this immigration reform law with a wall, with no chain migration, with no lottery. Let's give whatever the other side, the Republicans, are asking for, but we need to put an end to this situation, and we need to understand that those kids will stay because they are the perfect
They're not
ideal
all kids,
immigrants.
though, Elvira. I mean, let's be honest here. I mean, I think the average age is 24. And they can be up to 36 or 37 years of age. So these are not like toddlers and diapers, you know, that we're helping here.
Laura, 50% of illegals in this country have been here for more than 15 years. Those people have homes, cars, kids, friends, churches.
Oh, yeah, well, I get that,
people,
but it doesn't change the fact that I get it.
But the system failed, and the system allowed them to be here, and the business owners of America, and the politicians.
There's a new sheriff in town now, though. We got a new sheriff in town. Molly, look, they're very emotional stories. Yeah, they're very emotional stories.
We have a new sheriff in town, but what are we going to do with the ones that are in here?
You know what I say?
No one else
Elvira,
comes in.
I get it. What I think is, you know, the president campaigned on making America great again to represent the American people. And while MSNBC, Molly, today, another series of sob stories interviewing illegal immigrants who are in college, even though only 5% have graduated from college, and talking about, oh, aren't you upset that you might not be able to do study abroad? I kid you not that was one of the questions to an illegal immigrant here in California.
Well, and even more than that, I think so many of these stories, people don't talk about, you know, elites very much like the current immigration policy. It benefits them a great deal. For people who are at the lower end of the income scale, it's not the same story. Immigration has many benefits. It also has some downsides. And we don't talk about those trade-offs when we're just telling one side of the sob story and not about people, Americans, who are struggling at the other end of the income scale. And that needs to be told. And more than anything, you know, we talk about working on a fix for people who are currently here. But unless we do the the systematic, fundamental changes to make a coherent immigration policy, it doesn't matter, and we'll just be doing this every few years.
Unfortunately, we're out of time. Elvira, I'll have you on radio tomorrow. We'll do a really long segment. A great segment, though. I really appreciate it. And by the way, the president is fulfilling some pro-life promises and the latest teen fad that could literally kill your child. Our seen and unseen segment next. It's time for our seen and unseen segment where we expose what's really behind the big culture stories of the day. Not going to want to miss this. We begin with one of the biggest battles in the culture wars. It has been for 40 plus years, and something President Trump is doing that no sitting president has done before. Let's bring in Fox News contributor Raymond Arroyo. Okay, Raymond, what is Trump doing for the first time in history?
Not since Ronald Reagan. Yeah, well, this is a big deal. Tomorrow, before the pro-life march, hundreds of thousands of people coming to March for Life.
Young people.
The president has never addressed a March for Life. This president is having a Rose Garden ceremony with organizers of the march as well as young kids from colleges across the country. He'll address them. It'll be simulcast on the mall itself. Ronald Reagan did a phone call that was simulcast, but this is the first president that will actually be seen.
Now, a lot of
live.
people thought and predicted that Donald Trump was just saying he was pro-life.
Yeah.
Remember in that famous exchange with Hillary during the debates? He said, "This is a baby. These are a baby." And you want to
the most pro-life pronouncement we've ever heard from a Republican or any other.
I remember watching the debate, going, "Oh my God, did he really just say that?"
Yeah.
And so Reagan did a phone call. Bush sent a letter, or
yeah, well, he did some kind of recorded speech, I think. But this is the first time there's a Rose Garden ceremony. But there's substance that the president is following this up with.
What is it?
Today, he established at the Health and Human Services Department a conscience and religious liberty protection unit, essentially, that will allow healthcare providers, institutions, and doctors to opt out of abortions and gender reassignment surgeries. Highly controversial, but a defense of religious liberty that was really rolled back under President Obama.
Gender reassignment surgery. That's just what our kids apparently are needing today. All right, now, how do we go from that to laundry pods?
Well,
I'm a liquid laundry person. I don't like.
You don't like the pods?
The pods frighten me. I don't know why, but the pods.
Tide pods.
Yeah, there they are.
Those laundry pods. Kids have begun to eat these as part of a challenge online, which shows you. Now, you couldn't get kids to put soap in their mouth without a punishment. Now, an online challenge.
They're cooking them. Look at this.
They're cooking them. They eat them. But Laura, 5 people have died over this.
What?
They vomit. They get sick, diarrhea, the whole 9 years.
Sounds fun.
It's caused blindness.
That's what happens when I watch Pelosi speeches.
But you know what that tells me? If it's pretty, people are drawn to it. They crave it because it kind of looks like a candy. Like so many things in the culture, you'll even be attracted and do things you shouldn't do if it's pretty enough and it's dressed up.
Dumb stunts online.
Horrible.
I mean, we've seen this.
10,000 complaints a year to the Centers for Disease Control
Use the
for kids
powder.
who've eaten these things.
Use the powder or the liquid.
Don't tell them that.
Now, they'll be snorting the powder.
No, we don't want that.
All right, what about the He Too movement? We've had the Me Too. Now the male models are saying they've been abused.
There was a big story in the New York Times. Bruce Weber, a very famous fashion photographer, the guy who created all those Calvin Klein ads, Abercrombie and Fitch. Remember the naked young kids? You know, all the teens who were there.
Which I didn't like.
He shot that. 15 male models came forward and said, wait, I was abused by this guy. And I won't go through all the gross details. However, it is an interesting question. You have men who are sexually abused. They are paid about 100 times, in some cases 200 times less than their female counterparts.
Wait, should there be equality in the
Maybe it's time
payments?
for a He Too movement.
That's
what some are saying.
Well, I don't think in the Women's March on Saturday, the pro-life march will be massive
on
tomorrow.
Friday, right.
All these kids, buses from Notre Dame. How many buses from Notre Dame
100
University?
buses from Notre Dame. 1,000 kids coming in.
But the chicks are showing up on Saturday, right? Are they going to be standing up for the men?
Well, I hope they don't look like the Golden Globe ladies we saw. This is the problem.
No.
It's mixed messages.
Do we have that full screen of the Golden Globe gals?
But this is a little bit like the laundry pod story. People see one thing and they're drawn to it. But if you're saying respect women, respect me for who I am.
The low.
This may not be the image you want to portray.
Well, I mean, they're pretty women, but you know.
Well, look, I'm all for beautiful women. Hey, but do you want to be respected for your mind and your work? Or for other aspects?
Always for the mind.
Always for the mind.
Always. You men only care about the minds of the women. Rebecca has both. Your wife.
She has both.
All
That's
right. Well, Raymond, thanks so
Thank
much.
you.
And by the way, Arroyo, President Trump delivers what many are calling, I kid you not, the best speech of his presidency. It happened today. The Mooch is here with reaction. A speech today delivered by President Trump, a glowing report card he gave on the state of the U.S. economy's first year in office. Speaking to workers at H&K Equipment in Pennsylvania, Trump cited the immediate effects of his historic tax cuts and what they did across America.
There's never been a better time to hire in America, to invest in America, and to believe in the American dream than right now. Americans crossed oceans, tamed the wilderness, dug out the Panama Canal, and launched a man onto the face of the moon. American hands and grit poured the concrete in our highways and forged the steel in our skyscrapers. Americans do anything, build anything, and create anything as long as we have pride in our country, confidence in our values, and respect for our great American flag. Because America doesn't belong to the Washington power brokers. It belongs to you, and I think we've taught them that.
Joining us now with a reaction from New York is former White House Communications Director Anthony Scaramucci. Anthony, this speech was awesome. I know you've already written a piece for USA Today chronicling all these successes that Trump has had. If any other president in another party had had such a year of accomplishment, the media would be going bananas, correct?
Yeah, 70% approval rating. They'd all be cheering him. But, Laura, it's common sense and it's policy. And policy, as we know, matters. And it's great leadership from the bully pulpit. He's encouraging people that actually don't even like him, like Tim Cook, to invest in America because it makes so much common sense and it's so commercially sound. That's the reason, Laura.
And in the next segment, I'm going to talk about this group I talked to today. Big equipment distributors, heavy equipment distributors across the United States. Unbelievable stories. But you see him in those settings, Anthony, and you see him with people who are actually creating something, not people who, you know, frankly, just like me, who talk for a living, but they're actually creating something, they're concrete things. They know what it's like to make a payroll every day. And I like him in those settings. I want to see more of him with real Americans creating real opportunities for other Americans, don't you?
No question about it. And he's also benefiting from what I call the spring loading, Laura. The last administration was decidedly anti-business, so there was a hoard of cash that business leaders were saving because they were so worried about the government. As he's unleashing growth and he's reducing regulation, which I do write about in tomorrow's USA Today piece, you're going to see extraordinary growth over the next 3 or 4 quarters, and I think he's going to surprise people in the midterms.
And remember, we were talking about Apple. You said Tim Cook has said really negative things about the president. All these CEOs who abandoned Trump's business council. Remember that, Anthony? They said, oh, this is the end of the Trump agenda. The business council has disbanded. When push comes to shove, who's been better for Apple? Obviously, Donald Trump, not Barack Obama. But people are still trying to give Obama credit for this. I kid you not.
Yeah,
20,000 Apple jobs.
And I hear you, and that will last for a little while longer. But by the middle of next year, there'll be nobody to give credit to other than the president and his administration. But the really good news, Laura, is for the American people. Watch how consumption starts to improve now as each American, both middle-class families, lower middle-class families, have extra disposable income in their pockets. That'll set off the virtuous circle that we often talk about in the economic world.
Are you worried that the market's overheated, Anthony? I mean, everyone's like, it's going to collapse. It can't stay this high. It can't keep going up. There's going to be a correction. How bad could that be?
So over 30 years that I've been in Wall Street, one of the big metrics that I look at is the price of the market relative to GDP. That's starting to trend a little high. We're in that like 175% zone, Laura. But the very, very good news is that you're seeing a big increase in corporate profitability and growth. And so next year's earnings will probably support current asset prices. So at these levels, I'm totally okay. We'll have to see what happens over the next couple of months if it continues to go up.
You know, and Anthony, you mentioned this, but a lot of people don't talk about it, is the repatriation of capital, profits back to the United States. Wall Street Journal did this yesterday, $2.5 trillion overseas. 311 companies. It's now starting to come back. And the feds say they're going to get upwards of $350 billion in taxes just from that repatriation. We're not even talking about how significant that figure is. That's wild.
It's amazing. And what viewers need to know is that there's a terrific multiplier effect off of those numbers. So as that money comes back into the economy, it can be used for infrastructure, rebuilding airports, rebuilding roads, the electrical grid. There's a whole host of things that can happen now as a result of good economic policy.
Awesome. I can't wait to see your piece tomorrow, USA Today. I'm going to post it on LauraIngraham.com and beyond. Anthony, thank you so much for that analysis. And what I learned today, I just mentioned it, from people on the forefront of this economic resurgence when we come back.